So the objective here would be to have a society that propagates or spreads the behavioural norms that best serve the group and the individuals in it, and then discourages those that don't. In order to look at this problem set, we're going to have a glance at socialization or intra-socialization, intra-governance, essentially just the way in which we mold and shape each other's behaviors. And we're going to look at a particular aspect because in a group, if you imagine a group of people together, a behavioural norm will start to emerge through their interactions. Then later, they'll consciously acknowledge it, turn it into some sort of story or set of ideas. And what's incredible about human beings is because of the power of ideas and words, those norms can then spread to other groups far beyond the reach of that first group, which is how we can build these huge societies over vast distances. But we're interested today in that first stage, that emergence of a new behavioural norm. The reason we want to look at this is because this is, if you will, the stage at which we can nip things in the bud, but also the stage that is often least examined in our own life. We want to answer a simple question. Is there a key to a better society hiding in plain sight, right under our nose in our day-to-day life? So we're going to do that by looking at the process of socialization, just in an outline, then taking an example of socialization working well, very simplistic example, and then again take this overly simplistic view of an example of socialization working poorly. So first, let's take the example of an animal that lives on its own. It's got nothing outside of itself that is conspiring to tame any of the unknown, meaning that there are threats outside of itself and opportunities, and nothing is helping it to fend off the threats or find the opportunities. Now you take an animal that lives in a group, all of a sudden you've got outside of itself a bunch of other beings that are working to tame the unknown by pushing away any threats and bringing towards it any opportunities. But of course there's a trade-off, because in order for the group to be able to work together to tame the unknown outside, it also needs to be able to tame the individuals in the group. This means that the individual might not always get to work in its own self-interest as a trade-off for being part of a group. Now it stands to reason that the animals that are able to form larger and larger groups are susceptible to influence from the group, because in order to structure greater and greater numbers of animals, you need greater and greater malleability or susceptibility to changing the behavior of the individual for the benefit of the group. If you look at human beings, the sheer scale of the societies, of the groups that we have built, infers that we as individuals must be very susceptible to this shaping process. Right, so let's take the first example, albeit a simple one. You've got a kid that is feeling a little bit peckish, so they tiptoe to the kitchen and towards the forbidden biscuit tin. They know they're not supposed to be having biscuits at this time. They quietly lift the lid off, eat a couple of biscuits, and then place the lid back on. But when they look over their shoulder, they see their older sibling. Now all of a sudden they get a sinking feeling in their stomach because they know that they're in trouble. They scurry off to their bedroom and hide away, hoping that the older sibling isn't going to dob them in to the parents. In this scenario, the older sibling embodies the group or the will of the group. The individual, the child, was working in its own self-interest for a moment, but it was interrupted by the reality of the fact that it exists within a group and therefore is beholden to the behavioural norms of that group. Now, there are also much, much larger consequences for this behavioural norm that is being generated in the child, because there is an understanding that, of course, if all the individuals in a given group just act on every whim that they have and start taking or stealing or breaking rules, then the group itself is eventually going to break down. The child doesn't need to understand this. And that's what's really important here, because in order for this process to work, the wider ramifications of the behavior generated don't need to be seen or understood or anticipated by the individual that is being shaped. If we take another example of a child that's having a great day because it's looked out the window and it's seen that it's snowing and it can't wait. So it goes scurrying down to its older brother's room. His older brother's not having a good day, pretty anxious about going to school, doesn't fancy it, grumpy. So the door opens, the little brother comes gallivanting in and starts bouncing about, really wanting to just share this moment of excitement with his brother. And his brother flips and causes the little kid to run off crying. Later in the day, maybe the child's sat at the table and wants to talk about how exciting its day has been playing in the snow, but looks at its older sibling and thinks twice. Maybe expressing its enthusiasm is going to get it into hot water again. So it just stays quiet. Now, of course, there's always going to be a place for people to learn to change and modify their emotions in order to be sensitive to the emotions of others around them. But having said that, it's not evident that the child learning, if you imagine that this sort of behavior is repeated again and again, or responses repeated again and again, it's not evident that the child learning that expressing its enthusiasm is a bad thing, is of any benefit to the child, nor is it of any benefit to the wider group. So both of these examples are incredibly simplistic, and I acknowledge that. But what I'm trying to do is highlight, in the simplest terms possible, this often subconscious process. It could be in the workplace, at home, in a friendship group, but all of a sudden we monitor and switch off and change our behavioral norms based on the output of the group and the feelings that those cause, the feelings of potential rejection or the feelings of potential gain. And those feelings, whilst important because they are the mechanism that allow us to integrate into a wider group, are not necessarily always the best indicator of how to generate behaviors that will extend beyond ourselves in a beneficial fashion. But as we mold each other in our reactions to certain behaviors, we will also inadvertently start to enforce and reinforce behaviors that don't benefit the individual and don't benefit the wider group. So my call to action would be to take a look at the interactions in your day-to-day life and examine them with the lens of socialization. Are we socializing one another towards a greater future or towards trouble? If you've enjoyed the ideas discussed in this video, give it a share. Or if you think somehow there are ideas that are missed or slightly missed the point with, then jump into the comment section or jump over to our Reddit page to get the discussion going, because this isn't a fixed document or a final say on the matter. This is an ongoing debate, and I would be really interested in hearing your opinion on this subject. Until next time.